Good afternoon, everybody. Very warm welcome to our weekly webinar. And as the noonday gun sounds into our Cape Town studio, we're really excited to kick off another insightful REI webinar. I'm Neil Peterson. I'm the founder and content-in-chief of Real Estate Investor, South Africa's premier real estate content and education platform since 2007. And at REI, we're deeply passionate about serving the South African real estate investor and also the business community through our digital platforms, rei.co.za, our monthly digital magazine, Real Estate Investor Mag, plus our virtual and in-person events. So today I have the pleasure of serving as your host and moderator for our webinar today. And we're really thrilled to have you join us for this insightful session. And our topic for today's webinar is unlocking the path to home ownership, and specifically for first-time home buyers. So before I introduce our esteemed guests today, a bit of housekeeping. If you happen to accidentally log out during the webinar, don't worry, you simply use the same link as before to get back in. And for those registered attendees who couldn't join us live today, fret not. We will email you a link to the recording of the webinar. So alternatively, you can access this webinar recording under replays in the events section on the rei.co.za website. And to our audience, we encourage your participation. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar for us to pose to our resident experts here today, who I'll introduce shortly. And to pose a question, you simply type the question and you submit it via the Q&A box, not the chat box. That's for general comments, and it's located on the bottom right-hand screen. And anytime during the webinar, when we'll address all your questions during the last Q&A panel discussion, that will be in the end part of the webinar. So without further ado, let's delve into the essence of today's masterclass, and we will shortly introduce our guests. So basically, if you're ready to turn your dream of owning a home or acquiring your first property investment, this is the place to be. So certainly, many aspiring property owners face a lot of challenges due to either a lack of financial literacy, know-how. So today really is your first step, your first guide to help you every step of the way. And we will be discussing valuable insights and unpacking to get to understand the different residential property sectors and the roles that they play in the market, and how to get onto the property ladder and navigating the process of making your first property offer, and how to successfully finance your first property, how to obtain a pre-qualification report for finance, how to overcome challenges related to bad credit, effectively managing your finances and purchase costs, handling legal procedures with confidence, and understanding the role of municipalities. So without further ado, our first guest is Meyer de Waal. He is a practicing attorney from MDW. He's also the founder of My Bond Fitness. And Meyer would like to give us some more background about himself. So Meyer, without further ado, something that I haven't mentioned, you can introduce yourself in full to the audience today.
Thanks a lot, Neil. It's such a privilege to be here with yourself and Marius today. So I'm an attorney in Cape Town, and we started the concept of a rent to buy way back in 2007. And it's quite interesting that now in turbulent times when people are struggling to get home loans, that rent to buy is actually one of our flagship products, because people are struggling to get home loans. And the same happened in 2007 when they couldn't get home loans when the National Credit Act was implemented. And then we realized also a lot of people come to us because their credit scores are not so strong. And there we developed the concept of budget fitness, My Budget Fitness. We want to make it light, and we want to help people get back into shape with their credit scores. Then we discovered that there are subsidies available, FLISP. And I was very cheeky and I registered the domain flisp.co.za. First, the government came out rolling punches at me. And I said, guys, I'm actually your best friend. I'm helping you with subsidies. And we still have a FLISP website, and it tracks a lot of clients. So that's actually our second flagship. Now the government has turned around. We've got an MOU with the National Housing Finance Corporation. We're working very close with the Department of Infrastructure to help them to roll out programs. Then we develop software where we can actually do a pre-qualification for a home loan. And obviously, if your credit score is not so strong, we rather recommend that we give you a repair service, like a panel beating service, to assist you to improve your score. And we also started as attorneys selling properties. So we've got a network of 20 firms of attorneys national to help people sell properties. And so we've got rent to buy with finance as well. So we've really got almost like a whole comprehensive service. And we always say that we want to advocate for the first-time buyer, because we realize that people often look down on first-time buyers particularly when they enter the market, they don't know how to start. We're involved with quite a couple of projects with the local municipalities where we meet, and people have got names on waiting lists going back for years and years. And nobody really helped them to understand, what can I buy? What type of subsidy can I add to my purchase price? And the amazing thing is that from the 1st of April 2022, 2 years ago back, the subsidies were de-linked from a home loan. And all of a sudden now, you can actually get a savings account that you've got 100,000 Rand saved, 50,000 Rand saved, and you can add that to your FLISP or first-time home finance subsidy. And that really amazes, opens up the door. So we are able to fill the gap within the gap housing market. And thanks for the privilege of sharing this with you and working with you, because we really want to go out to every first-time buyer in South Africa and say, you can own your own house. And just dream, and we never kill the dream or stop the dream for you to own your own house. Thank you, Neil.
No, wonderful. Thanks, man. I think there's a lot of people that need your panel beating services. So I like your narrative that you use the side of that, but certainly on a more sort of serious note, absolutely. I think that's what you hold everybody's hand every step of the way. So great having you here, Mayor. Wonderful. Our second guest is Marius Miller. Marius is the co-founder of Soho Properties and currently serves as a non-executive director, JSE REIT Safari Investments. Previous JSE roles have include MD of I4, CEO of Texton, as well as executive director at Resilient Pangbourne Diversified and Monyetla. And to you, Marius, wonderful having you. Do you want to introduce yourself and maybe some areas which I haven't covered in terms of your background in property?
Sure. Thanks, Neil. Appreciate that. It's always nice to be back here, and looking forward to a good discussion. So the business that we focus on at the moment is social housing, and the entity that we do that under is a not-for-profit organization. So social housing, and we'll get into that a little bit later, is not an ownership model, or it's not currently an ownership model, but we see it as a stepping stone to the product that Mayor offers. And I'm looking forward to give people hope, those that don't qualify at the moment, as to how they can become more qualified in terms of being able to access those FLISP products and get them into a home that they own.
Wonderful. Great having you both on board. Great having you, Marius. I'm going to start with you to maybe just elaborate, because you just touched on the social housing aspect, because I think it is such an important space, and it's a global issue. It's not a South African thing. So maybe just tell us a little bit more. What is social housing? How does it work? And maybe just set the scene about, and then specifically your role in that space.
So with government, there's a number of programs that run. There's focus on those who are unable to access homes, right? So for that category, there's the Breaking New Ground program, and I think it's more commonly known as the RDP program, and that's essentially giving homes to people who are unable to afford homes. That essentially is an ownership model, but there's also a rental model that caters for that space, and that's known as CRUs, and that's community rental units. So where social housing comes in is the level that's slightly above RDPs and CRUs. And the target audience, as far as social housing is concerned, is exactly the same group of people that Mayor would be targeting. So that's those earning Ours, we have a slightly lower starting base of 1,850, all the way up to 22,000 rand household income per month. The way that this program works is that one develops as a developer or not-for-profit organization, and you make these units available to potential tenants that qualify, both in terms of the rental, but also being South Africans, and also not owning other homes. They would be able to enter into the Schraal market at reduced rentals. So the rentals that they then pay is essentially quite subsidized. And so, for example, the smallest unit that we have would be a studio unit, would be a minimum of 30 square meters, self-contained, with a bathroom and a kitchen facility. And that could be as low as 900 Rand per month because of the subsidy that we receive from government. Going up to units that are a bit more expensive, depending on the income, but at the 22,000 range, you know, you could be paying rentals up to 6,500 Rand per month for two bedroom unit. So it's quite a vast array of people that we try and address, and that market, you know, both that May and myself would be covering in terms of income, by certain studies say that makes up 80% of the population in South Africa. So there's a huge need in that market.
No, absolutely, and a very important need. And I think from, you know, I just cannot believe, you know, being at a conference three and a half weeks ago, the big discussion is how do we sort out this housing problem? So it is such an important thing. And I mean, there's a lot of initiatives like the Kai Lamb project and that kind of stuff. So certainly yourself working with government, Marius, is incredibly important. So we'll carry on that discussion now. But May, I want to get into you because you're obviously operating, as Marius said, in a very similar market, but not the same, not quite the same. We call it more affordable housing as opposed to. So maybe just tell us that market. What is the affordable housing sector? And I know it accounts for a massive part of the market in South Africa. So do you just sort of elaborate a little bit on that and the size of market?
Thanks, Neil. There's not a problem in respect of housing delivery in the market above R1 million. There's a huge problem with supplying houses under the R1 million market, and that's where we focus on, because we realize that people need accommodation and the basic accommodation. So that's why we are helping people that earn more than 3,501 Rand. And crazy enough is that we help people with that income to actually get a subsidy from the government because they qualify for the maximum FLISP or first-time buyer subsidy, first-time finance subsidy. And they often have the assistance of an employer that can maybe provide that little bit of a hupstootjie or extra money to provide that shortfall in the purchase price. So we go get the maximum subsidy. Sometimes they even have their own savings that they can put down. So you find traditionally that the banks are shy, reluctant to give a person a home loan if you earn less than 7.5 or 7,500 Rand per month. And that is where the gap lies within the gap market. We're quite involved with about 4 or 5 municipalities at the moment. And when they work out the budget to develop a house, where they even get the house or the land at a subsidized cost, which almost cost them nothing. And they just have to put the top structure on. And then they roll out a price of 750,000 Rand or 650,000 Rand. If you go to the platteland, if you go to the poorer communities, people don't earn that money because to pay back the bank 7,500 Rand per month, you've got to earn 3 times that amount of money. We've got to trim down to come in with properties 400,000, 300,000 Rand. And that is where the Centre of Affordable Housing did this amazing study. They went to all the metro areas. I shared that information with you, and they realized that there's a huge amount of properties that are lying under the 600,000 Rand threshold. And they are not developed by property developers because developers cannot actually put a product down the market now for less than 650,000 Rand. 700, 900, 1.2 million. So we need to find those properties in the secondary market that are for sale. You combine that with a government subsidy, and then you also combine it either with a home loan, assistance with an employer. You also do a rent to buy, you do installment sales. So you have to be creative, you have to be understanding the concept, and you have to listen to the person in the street or on the street to actually ask them, how can I help you? Because if I just go through the normal sausage machine of a bank, they just spit them out and they discard them. And we say, let's look at you individually. Let's panel beat your credit score a little bit. In the Bradasdorp concept from Mossel Bay, we are helping double the amount of buyers getting their foot in the door. They're living in their houses now with a 3-year rent to buy. So while they're renting, 50% of their savings are put, or their rental is put into a savings account. And after this 3-year period, you can subtract that from the purchase price. You can subtract the subsidy. We bring down the purchase price with 150,000 Rand. And that changed the normal home loan applicant to a blue chip client when he one day goes to the bank and apply for a home loan. That we combine with a personal trainer, because we have to keep you fit while you are buying. Otherwise, if you just walk away, the person don't understand the concept of homeownership. And working with your magazine and yourself, we bring this education to the buyers and say, this is how you go about to own your property, but you also have a long-term plan. Buying a house is the longest investment that you will ever make. It takes you 20 years to pay it off, maybe shorter, maybe longer, but it's a big operation you're going to undertake, and that's why we hold your hand all along the way.
Great stuff. And I think, Mayor, you can share, a little bit later in terms of that process. I just want to move over to Marius. Marius, your approach to get somebody into the property is very different. I think obviously a lot of the properties you need to work with government. I mean, there is government aid, and I think they normally start with the rental. So maybe just talk us through that process of somebody that needs to move into a social housing. How does it get managed? How does that process start? Where your involvement is in and getting people into properties. How does that work?
Thanks, Neil. So the process is very much what you would see in a commercial practice. It's a matter of getting information regarding the applicant's earnings. And that's really the starting point, because the earnings will determine what rental they would be paying. And so it's not so much a test of affordability, but it's more one of qualification. So as long as you're below the threshold or within the band that's set, you would qualify. And then, of course, you would need to be a South African citizen. And so it's a very simple process, but there are challenges that comes with that as well. Because social housing being seen as a government product, people think that it is government owned, and it's not. It's government funded to a certain extent, but not fully. And so one does have challenges where if the properties aren't managed well, that you could be exposed to rental boycotts, for example. There's also times when, certain political statements want to be made by whoever the party may be. And that tends to complicate things, and it does disrupt the lives of those who are then, living within an estate that is deemed as social housing. But it's a fairly simple process in terms of the application. The challenge that we find is that there's just not sufficient amount of stock, and in terms of the need that exists. So and that's not because government's not making funds available, and it's not because of resources not being available, but I think that it's also a matter of having sufficient qualified players in the market that can bring the product to fruition. And that's more the challenge that we face, rather than the pure tenanting of these properties.
Okay, great. So Mayor, let's delve in a little bit more as to where one starts, to get into the market. Let's talk about the finance and how one gets the finance. And you've already touched on the first home finance, previously called FLISP subsidies, and how that works. Do you want to maybe take us through that process?
Neil, thank you very much. We often get these questions because people stream to us through our FLISP website. They stream to us for our rent to buy website and also our home loan website. And this first question we normally ask them, thank you very much. And what do you have in mind to buy? What is your dream that you want to achieve? And we often find a person, they say, I want to buy £1 million house. And now we start working out what's your income. And you find out that we apply the rules of the banks where we say 30% on a FAMSAC, 30% of your income you can pay back onto a home loan. So if you earn 30,000 Rand, you can afford to pay back 10,000 Rand. Now, I've done some comparisons how the purchase power of buyers actually decreased since the interest rates were at 7% a few years ago. For example, if you wanted to buy 800,000 Rand property and take up 100% home loan, you would then have to have an income of just over 20,600 Rand. With the interest rates going up to 11.75, to qualify for that same 800,000 Rand, you now need to earn 8,000 Rand a month more. And salaries didn't keep in track with that to actually accommodate that same buying power that you have. So 8,000 Rand more that you've got to earn to buy exactly the same house. Luckily, the subsidies were increased last year with 30%. So while we saw purchase power going down, the subsidies were increased. And we really, with that, we saw a huge benefit of helping buyers with that affordability and income and all that stuff. So really, it's made a big change coming through that on that. Neil, maybe you can click through the next part of the screen. But so affordability is a big change. So what we look at is to say, let's work out, number one, your affordability. What is your income? 30% of income. We also look at the type of income that you have. Are you self-employed? Do you work for a salary, which is much easier for the banks to understand? But the next crunch is actually your credit score. So a lot of people come to us, and this is why we've got the budget fitness program. We ask the person, I want to do rent to buy. And I say, now, why do you want to rent to buy? Why don't you go for a normal home loan? And they say, because of credit. And then I realized that credit score is the big albatross or a big ball and chain around their legs that they can't move forward. And that's why we've got a budget fitness program to actually enable a person to understand, why did the bank decline me? Also, why did the bank add 2% on top of my interest rate? Because the banks have to work in an insurance policy type of protection for themselves by adding 1% or 2% on top of your prime rate. We often find that the poorest of the poor, the affordable market, they are burdened with an extra 1 or 2% extra interest on top of the interest rate. And I did research that 2% on top of your interest rate will cost you 52% more on your home loan over 20 years. And that's, again, we have to advertise, educate home buyers. Don't take up the highest interest rate. Rather, wait a little bit for your home buying purchase transaction. Get your credit score improved, then you go back to the bank. So number one is your income. Number two is your credit score. And number three is your affordability and your loan to value. Now we come to, the third one is your loan to value. Can you put down a deposit for the bank? And if you can't put down a deposit, the bank will see you as a high risk. And they may even see that your credit score is good, but your affordability is up to the yield. You are almost like indebted right over the top of your head, but your income is strong enough. So there we say that we have to look at your credit score. We can determine if your credit score is green, good, average, orange, or red, bad, and then you get rejected. The banks are just throwing everybody in the dustbin, and we come and we collect. So we're in the recycling business. We help people in recycling that credit score, improving it. And now we also go to the subsidies, and we actually get yourself a subsidy from the government, working with the National Housing Finance Corporation, working with the Department of Infrastructure, and we go and determine first, what is the subsidy that you can qualify for? For example, on 15,000 Rand, you can get an 86,000 Rand subsidy. Now that's free money. You don't have to pay that back. You can subtract that from the purchase price, and then you apply for a smaller home loan. The moment you apply for a smaller home loan, the bank loves it that you've got a deposit, you've got skin in the game, and therefore we can negotiate a lower interest rate. So there are so many parameters that the buyer needs to understand. And we find that a lot of estate agents do not understand this. They just go for the highest home loan because applying for a subsidy is like a huge thing to do. It's a delay of a transaction. But if you don't structure your purchase agreement correctly and advise your buyer that you can apply for a smaller home loan, you can qualify easier for your home loan, nobody will do it for you. So that's where we come back as the in Afrikaans, the kampvechter. What's the word there for in English? It's like the real chasing for buyers to help them to understand this, that they can actually qualify easier for home loan, have less to pay back the bank every month, and then in that opportunity be able to own their own home.
Wonderful. So I think there's a lot of questions which I'm going to leave to the end part, because I just want to bring in Marius now, just from the social housing perspective, because Marius, just recently there's been an association now that's been formed called, you know, the Multifamily Association, which essentially is build to rent. So it's not ownership, it's typically rental. And you mentioned earlier on, obviously your model slightly different. Obviously you own a part ownership, you don't have full title on the property. So maybe just your comments around the multifamily, their role and your role in related to them, this association.
Thanks, Neil. Maybe just to comment on something that Maya mentioned earlier, and that's the role of the banks. The first home finance program is a great program, because what it does, you know, it reduces the capital amount. I mean, that's really the essence of it. And what that does is that it lowers the risk for the bank, because the client now has a lower amount that they need to pay down, and the income, you know, is essentially the same. The disposable income increases through a program like FLISP. With social housing, it is different, because it's critical that one has bank support. You know, that's important. But the banks feel that they are not sufficiently de-risked as far as social housing is concerned. And so this product that would help to get people off the street or get them into better accommodation is very limited, because that relationship between what the government is offering and what the private sector is able to commit to is not aligned. And of course, business is there to make money. Business is there to mitigate risk and look after the interests of the shareholders. So, you know, it's not about laying the fault at the door of any one party, but I think there does need to be greater conversations, greater engagement between government and the private sector. One, to make funding available, but I think also importantly to align and understand the needs of each other and come up with a better product. So why is that important? Is that if someone's able to go into a home and they're paying a reduced rental, those challenges of paying a deposit that Maya spoke about earlier, that can be overcome. The fact that someone has a bad credit rating becomes less important when they're renting, and so they're able to rehabilitate during that process as well. You mentioned about this organization that had been formed. They're called SAMRA. It's a number of institutional investors with a significant amount of rental stock between them. I forget the exact number, but I think it's up at 50,000 units that they have collectively between them. And the concept of multifamily is very much an American term, which has been adopted worldwide. And essentially it means that it's a complex where there's a number of families living together, and sometimes under one roof, but not in the same home. So if you're thinking of a block of flats, that would be multifamily. But in the US, you could find it as an estate, like you're seeing behind. That could be a multifamily complex as well on the screen behind. So that's another important step that's being taken, because what you're seeing there is people with a common interest coming together. And it's important that, you know, this need of housing should be discussed under one umbrella. There should be a platform that's created where you can come together and everyone has a voice and everyone has a contribution that they can make. So the formation of SAMRA is fantastic. Social housing has its own organization called NASHO, National Social Housing Organization. And there are other various ones. But the sooner that there's a platform similar to a NEDLAC, where one's able to sit down as government, financiers, developers, I think that platform is dearly needed.
Absolutely. So, you know, it's good to hear that there's so many of all of these initiatives and which are moving, you know, and dealing with this housing shortage, which is such an important thing. And once again, I just want to reiterate, you know, I attended a conference 3 years ago to a couple of donors to the Kaya Land Project, and I bring it up again, and it's such an incredible initiative. Where the title of the property, so, you know, in South Africa, we currently have 8 million to 10 million people living in structures. And what Kaya Land's job is really to split up those properties into a piece of land which is owned by the owner and give people title to that structure, which is now worth something. Now, once again, we cannot do it alone. They cannot do it alone. They need help of government. They need help of municipalities. They've already handed over 14,000 titles to people who never owned that before. And I think it is such an important initiative. And it's kind of projects and initiatives like this that I think that can really change, you know, South Africa. And as Chris Loviso, who is one of the speakers and one of the big donors of the Kaya Land Project, said, government can literally at the swipe of a pen hand over those 8 million structures title, because we're talking about 2,000 Rand a pop, because it's at a highly reduced level in terms of receiving that title. So the sponsorship and I think the wherewithal and the money is there. And just imagine how much value and wealth that would unlock in this country and giving people the value that they do. I don't know if you've got any comments around that, Marius.
Yeah, home ownership is really important to having a society that is stable, both economically and politically as well. And I think particularly given the history of the country, there's a political connotation to it, but there's a deep-seated emotional aspect to it as well. And I hear what Christopher is saying, but I know that process is fraught with challenges as well in terms of identifying the right people and so on and so forth. But the fact that they are trying to do something in terms of donating money to make sure people do get title, those sorts of initiatives are what one needs, you know, and often the contribution with the process of getting that contribution actualized is stalled because there's not sufficient resources to be able to unblock those bottlenecks in terms of getting the title to someone. And again, you know, there's where private sector, I think particularly in that kind of environment, would like to step in, because there's no particular vested interest for them in terms of giving someone a title deed. It's not that you're going to be selling them a insurance policy afterwards or tiles to their roof or whatever it may be. And so it's really great to see something like that, and I applaud them for that initiative.
Yeah, great. May, we're going to come back to you and, to the audience. I see there's lots of questions that you're asking, so please submit your questions on the Q&A box. We will deal with them just now. May, I want you to elaborate a little bit more on FLISP and sort of the process, because I think it needs to be unpacked a little bit more. So maybe if you can revisit, I know you've touched on it, and maybe because there have been a lot of questions around there, which we will also deal with later, but maybe you can unpack FLISP, which is not FLISP anymore. It's now called First Home Finance. Marius, you will recall at last year's Reside Conference, we had First Home Finance there, and they said it's no longer called FLISP, it's now called First Home Finance. And I think a lot of people got a lisp saying FLISP. So I think eventually that was also one of the reasons why they changed it, make it a lot more easier and actually understandable. So Maya, if you can maybe just tell us a little bit more about the FLISP or First Home Finance and how that process works again.
Thanks, Neil. It's an initiative to help first-time buyers. And number one, you must be a first-time buyer and never owned a property before or received a free property before, like a HOP or a B&G house. So where we're looking at the subsidy, you can just click through that. So we can see that in the past, the subsidy was only 88,000 Rand if you earn 10,000 Rand. And this is gross income, combined household income. So it counts for both parties, husband and wife or partner. It used to be 88, now it's 122. 15,000 Rand is now 86,000 Rand. And if you earn the maximum threshold, 22,000 Rand, you get 58,000 Rand. And this is an amazing opportunity for first-time buyers to actually have a deposit available. So you must be a first-time buyer, never had a property before. You must have a financial dependent, such as a spouse or a child. And you must also be a South African citizen. And now comes the magic that happened 2 years ago on the 1st of April. No April Fool's joke. This is our subsidy calculator. So you can Google FLISP subsidy calculator. You can punch in your income, your gross income, and it will spit out for you the subsidy that you may qualify for. So on the 1st of April 2022, the government de-linked the subsidies from home loans only, because they realized that getting a home loan is a difficult task. You've got to have a credit score, you've got to have affordability. And the problem lies a lot of people don't have a strong credit score, and therefore they flunk the test for a subsidy. All of a sudden, when they de-linked the subsidies, they made it available now to unsecured lending. They made it available to stokvel loans. They made it available to employee assistance. They made it available to personal savings. And for beautiful me is that they also made it available for rent to buy and installment sales. So the question that comes up, who can qualify? First-time buyer. You can't buy it in a company. You can only buy it as you're a first-time buyer. And it's obviously the idea behind this is not to buy it as investment and rent out the properties, but nobody really checks on that if you are going to rent it out. But the idea is to buy the property as a first-time buyer, and then you have a roof over your head, and you can use this subsidy to actually subtract the subsidies from your purchase price. So it's a really amazing opportunity, and we find now that they are actually bending over backwards to help people get access to the subsidies. It's still a long timeline to get the subsidy released from either department or the NHFC. But the good news is that we signed an MOU with the NHFC, the National Housing Finance Corporation. And in that MOU, they undertake to approve the subsidies within 21 working days. Now, once a subsidy is approved, they just don't pay out the money. They actually go out, and now you've got to prove ownership. And what we also included in the subsidy is also payment to PTOs. And this is a permission to occupy. And this exactly addresses the question that you just came up, Neil, people without title deeds. Because if you don't have a title deed, you can't go to the bank and apply for a mortgage. But luckily, if you have a PTO, you don't need to have a title deed. You can take an unsecured loan, you can take up your own savings account, and you can use that as a trigger for your subsidy. So getting a title deed is paramount because it changes your life. You have, as we always say, my card and transport, my title deed, that really becomes your anchor for homeownership and building wealth. But many circumstances, you don't have a title deed in the rural areas where they have a permission to occupy. And now, in terms of a de-link policy, you can also use that that PTO to arrange a subsidy. And the amazing thing is what's happening now, we find that they're coming also with other really amazing opportunities, what we call incremental housing, where they're looking to help you to actually buy material for your property as well. And they've got an arrangement with a building builder or a building company where they will release this money. And I was a very big fireblazer that they can also include legal fees. So the problem lies that they never included legal fees also to be covered by the subsidies. And all of a sudden, when the new subsidy came out, policy in 2022, they now include that the legal fees for attorneys can also be covered by this. Because the person that earns 15,000 Rand, 10,000 Rand, they don't have 22 or 50,000 Rand lying around in a savings account to cover the legal fees. And all of a sudden, now that's included. So when you apply for your subsidy, you indicate that and you submit your documents that I have to pay the transfer fees, I have to pay the bond registration attorney. So a portion can then go back into your home loan if you have excess money. A portion goes to pay the legal fees and a portion goes to the conveyancing attorney as a deposit. So it's really first home finances open up the market for people to actually enter the property market, use that money as a deposit, subtract it from your purchase price, and really have a game changer in your life.
Wonderful. That's great. It's, you know, and it really excites me, and I'm sure it excites a lot of other people there, that there's so many of these initiatives right now to get people on the property market and into the market and onto the ladder rather. And I think, you know, we're going to talk about some of those challenges just now because I've seen some of the questions there, Maya. So I'm going to come back to you. But first of all, Marius, from your perspective, from a social housing perspective, how can we fast track that housing process a little bit longer? I'm sure you obviously lobbying at government quite a lot. And you know, last year we started the residential and investment conference and development conference, Reside, and encourage everybody. It's in Johannesburg. It's from the 16th to the 19th of July. It's Sandton Convention Center. And I think last year, you've got to agree, Marius, where we managed to get municipalities to attend and government, you know, Department of Human Settlements. And I think it's these kind of conferences and initiatives that can start the dialogue to move forward on this. Your comments around fast-tracking the housing process.
Yeah. So Neil, I'm glad you mentioned Reside because I think that's a really good platform. You know, there's a lot of work that's been done with Salga. So as I understand it, this year in the program, they're actually dedicating a day where there's interaction with the municipalities throughout the country, and the municipalities will be showcasing there as well. So there's a good working relationship between certain bodies in the industry with government, and that certainly is a starting point. But the core challenge that we face is where the economy is at, right? And I know that interest rates has got a lot to contribute in terms of the challenges that we face. But if you have an economy that's not growing, and you've got an economy where people are, a significant portion of your population is unemployed, that presents a significant challenge for government. So I don't think there's any government in the world, let alone in South Africa, that doesn't want to house the people, right? But I was looking at the budget this year, and if you look at the baseline budget that was presented last year for the next 3 years, right? The amount of money that's allocated to human settlements from 2024 up to 2027 is in the order of 100 billion Rand, right? But that's a cut of nearly 14%, though, of the money that was budgeted last year for the same period, right? So when you look at the challenges that we're facing, it's a matter of these other priorities elsewhere that requires attention as well. And so social services, health, education, safety and security, and so forth. But I must say that the interaction that we've had with government departments, everyone is pulling in the same direction. You know, how you pull in that direction, you know, differs, and be that as it may. But what I can say that is a positive to take away is that the intention to move to an environment in a community in a country where housing becomes less of an issue is certainly happening. The challenge is the availability of resource, and that really starts with the availability of funding. And a government has a very big challenge in terms of balancing the budget. You know, it's not just a matter of increasing a number, because you increase a number by decreasing somewhere else. So that is a challenge, and that's why I think there needs to be great imperative on banks and the financial sector as well, because we often hear of impact investment and social in the areas of roads and harbors and infrastructure where there's maybe less of a risk, but we certainly do need them to refocus their attention as the private sector to the bottom end of the market.
Okay, great. You know, I think, Mayor, just over to you now. I know we were running, I can't believe where the time's gone. We've got some questions to answer and that kind of stuff. So we're moving forward. You actually got everybody really excited just before. And Marius is also, I think, you know, we've got these challenges. It's not easy. And there's challenges on both sides. There's challenges, obviously, in getting the rollout of government and funding and economies and all that kind of stuff. And but in terms of the creditworthy, and it seems that it is a lot easier, a lot more people can qualify for loans. But maybe let's just talk a little bit about the FLISP, because you mentioned it in your last discussion, that it takes a while to get first-time finance approved. And there's also a question that we've got from the audience here. You know, how long does it take to secure the FLISP subsidy? And how can a person make provision for the time in the, you know, in the finance raising clause? So yeah, how long does it take? What is, you know, and how can we actually overcome some of those challenges?
Thanks for the questions, Neil. I just want to go back to one question to Marius, where he mentioned that people are quite often, when they rent properties, they kind of got a laissez-faire concept about paying the rent, or they may politicize it when we do. A lot of our stock from rent to buy comes from existing property developers or landowners and land developers, property developers. And the moment you convert a person to say, I'm going to help you to buy your property that you're living in a rent to buy structure, they immediately change their perception about paying rent and improving their credit score. So they change over from, I'm going to pay, it becomes a grudge payment initially, but now it becomes an excitement payment to pay my rent every month, improve my credit score. So that is definitely what we've seen with one of our clients. They own about 3,500 properties. One of their tenants were 150,000 rand in arrears. And the moment they offered that property rent to buy, they immediately start paying their arrears, and they are paying the rent every month on time. So Neil, if we go back to the question about FLISP, how long does it take? If you look at the entire process, and I'm a conveyancing attorney, and I always find that we are right at the end when the pressure cooker starts to boil. We are there. I want my transfer to be registered by the end of the month. And if it doesn't happen, it's like all hell breaks loose. But when you are selling a property, that property is often in the market for 3 or 4 months, and you can't be sold. Now the sale is signed, and now you start applying for property finance. Now you apply for the FLISP, or the first home finance subsidy. I'm saying to everybody, just factor in 1 month extra in your life. It's not going to change your entire life. Just make sure I'm not going to move into a property on the 1st of April or 1st of May. I'm going to do it on the 1st of June. So if you start day one factoring in, I'm going to have to apply for a home loan, I'm going to apply for a subsidy thereafter, then everybody's got different expectations about the time we have to move in and the time we've got to apply. Often you can also get 100% home loan. Then you can apply for a subsidy to be paid retrospectively into a home loan. And this is one of the magic secret things I'm going to share with everybody today, that you can also apply retrospectively for a subsidy. We had one lady that was 40,000 Rand in arrears after 2 years with a home loan. So she started phoning us, crying every morning that she got a nasty letter from an attorney. This attorney just wants to sell a property on auction, and everybody is jumping on her. Our subsidy consultant, Francois, I can name him, he managed to get within 7 days a subsidy approval of 80,000 Rand. And I want to show the middle finger now, but I'm not going to do it here. I showed a middle finger to that attorney that was writing those rude letters. And I said, we've got a subsidy letter now of 80,000 Rand. They still wanted to fight and take it to court. I said, I'd love to see you in court when we have 80,000 Rand subsidy to pay into the home loan, changing a negative 40,000 Rand in a positive 40,000 Rand. On that Friday morning, that woman phoned me and Francois, and I had tears in my eyes, because it was such an amazing how we changed the life of this person, almost losing their house. So there is also retrospective subsidies where you can go back to all your home buyers that bought a few years ago and say, and we've got the magic date for you. You must just contact us. But there's a specific date that they don't go past that date and you are then too late. But you can apply late. But it takes a while to get the subsidy paid out, and live with it. And understand we're working with the government. They're trying to implement new subsidies. This last week, we had a meeting with NHFC, and we talked to them about this permission to occupy. We talked about them employers providing finance to buy. Because for them, it's a new game, although it's been running for 2 years. And they say, oh, this is new to me. And we say, okay, let's work with this. Let's massage this thing into a workable solution. There are so many people, if we can provide employee assistance, permission to occupy, rent to buy, installment sales, if we can accommodate and work this, because it's in the policy, it's law now, it's policy, but we don't know how to do that because it's new to me. It's been new for 2 years, but we want to rather fight than fight the applications or the process. We say, let's talk, let's help to work this out. And through this dialogue, we're working out the programs, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but we're going to get there, and we're getting there. And this is an amazing thing, that this subsidy of this lady was paid out into a home loan account within a month after we got the approval, and we managed to stop the sale in execution. So it's a work in progress. It doesn't happen overnight, and we're trying to reduce the timelines. And because of MOU signed, they are tied to pay out according to this MOU. And that is the beautiful part of that. So we have to stay with this and take it step by step by step. And as long as you can prepare your sale agreement with such expectations, nobody's got unrealistic expectations. So for us, that is why we try rather to walk away from that, because it's a high hurdle to come over. But if nobody helps the consumer and estate agents, I see we've got one question from a gentleman that's a mortgage originator. If we don't work together, we are not going to solve this than to say, it's too difficult, I'm walking away. We rather dig in and we roll up the sleeves and we do it.
Okay, so on that question from Dennis, it's who's the mortgage originator. Obviously, he's dealing with a lot of clients. So he's looking for, where does he go? Who do we refer them to? And, I'm so surprised, for such a big industry, it's so important. It should be actually, it should be woven into that industry. Yeah, absolutely.
Neil, I'm sorry interrupting you. I actually say there ought to be a class action against the banks. They ought not to allow a bond registration to go through if you earn under 22,000 Rand before asking that question, did you apply for a subsidy? Because you reduce the loan to value, you reduce the interest rate. We even have a website called Switch Your Home Loan, because we say to the bank, if you have insurance on your car and your insurance and your car goes down in value, but your broker will phone you and say, hey, Mayor, your car has gone down in value. I'm going to reduce your insurance, otherwise you're overinsured. No bank will call you 2 years, 5 years after you've owned your property and say, I see you've made a deposit into your bank account. You've got a better credit score. Would you like to reduce your interest rate? The bank stays quiet about that for 20 years. And so if people are not informed through sessions like this, and they're not through education and help and assistance, they will stay uninformed about that and lose thousands of rands in the course of owning your own home.
Okay, right. Okay, I think very good point there, Mayor. So, Marius, just coming back, and I'm going to ask both of you this question before we ask for your final wrap. There's a question around subletting properties. Now, obviously, when you're an owner of a property, Mayor, you can do anything with that property you like. But is that the same for a social housing? If so you decide to, well, I'm going to sublet this property. I mean, do you have the same rights, Marius?
No, so one of the rules is that you're not allowed to sublet, and the party who qualified has to occupy the premises. So in an ideal world, that is strictly controlled, and also the number of occupants would be linked to the application that took place originally. But the intention is for the individual to benefit from the subsidized rental, not for them to profiteer on it.
Okay, no, great. Okay, so okay, there's a few comments here, which I think, May, you've also got access to those comments, but I cannot believe we're 4 minutes to the bewitching hour already, which means that we need to get a little bit of a final wrap. So I'm going to ask first Marius to do his wrap and just give us your thoughts, maybe leave somebody with something positive that they can take forward, that they can use, and then I'll ask Mayor to wrap up.
Thanks, Neil. So I think it's important not to give up hope. You know, if the dream is to own a home at some point in time, you know, there are programs and plans, but I think that the best thing that one can do is to educate yourself with the processes that takes place around the whole home ownership process. And you know, webinars like this are fantastic. Conferences like Reside, which has now introduced master classes and so forth. Read up as much as you can and understand what you're getting into as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Excellent. I think a great way to end off there, Marius. And once again, I just want to reiterate, it is, if you look at the webinar chat box, I think if you want to really get into the market and understand more, get more education, as Marius says, attend the Reside conference. It's from the 16th to the 19th of July. It's in Johannesburg. It's at the Sandton Convention Center. Sign up for some of those classes. You know, the best investment you can get is your education in yourself. You cannot do better than that. And I'm sure Mayor also agrees with those sentiments as well. So Mayor, give us your final parting shots and final thoughts as well.
Thanks a lot, Marius. You've actually opened the door for me because this masterclass is actually the start of a series of first home buyer information sessions and education. We've started a whole platform where you can go and do your self-diagnostics. You can do your own credit check. From your credit check, you can determine if you're green, orange, or red. You can then enroll in programs supported by stuff that Neil has put together to help educate you and take time to groom yourself to become a strong home buyer. Marius, we want to bring all your tenants over to become home buyers one day, and you'll always have a big feed of new tenants that want to rent, and we want to educate all of them. So I'm actually extending an invite to you to collaborate, that we can actually help your tenants to become financial savvy. We have financial literacy programs, and to help them to improve a credit score, because a happy tenant pays the rent, and a happy tenant's got a happy landlord. So thank you, gentlemen, for this opportunity, and all the people that joined up today with questions. We really like to answer your questions afterwards as well. Neil, thank you very much for the opportunity.
No, absolutely. So I encourage the audience, you know, please, if you've got, you know, we will certainly give you access to Mayor and to Marius as well. But I just want to thank both of them. It's been a very insightful discussion. I encourage you to join us at the, excuse me, the Reside, the Residential and Investment Development Conference on the 16th to the 19th of July and in Johannesburg, and sign up for that event and really meet us in person. Maya will be there. Marius will certainly be there. And so I just want to thank Marius, co-founder of Soho Property. Thank you very much for you. And Maya Duval, founder of My Budget Fitness. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights today. Really, your knowledge and experiences have been truly insightful. And I think everybody's really got great insight today. To our audience, yes, we always appreciate your active participation, your engagement. So we also hope that you've also gained valuable knowledge and you are motivated to take action. I think that's the most important thing. So before we close, I just want to remind you again of our upcoming webinar next week. It's actually in the chat box there. There's a link. It's only going to be this Friday, so it's not our normal Thursday slot next week. The week after, we'll be back to our normal 12 o'clock slot. But this week's one is actually on Friday, and it's also a virtual and a live event from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And it's for entrepreneurs, small businesses. And we're going to do it both live and virtual, where you can log in, and you're going to be hosted by a multi-millionaire international businessman, Mayor Israel. And he really, and it's free event, everybody. It costs you absolutely nothing. I mean, I've been working with Mayor for quite a while, and incredible insights that will really help you to grow your business, how to fix your business, how to build it, how to correct it, and to certainly take it to the next level. So I encourage you all to join us if you're in Johannesburg, or if you're KZN or elsewhere in South Africa. You can just log on. It's free. As I say, the link is actually in the chat box over there. And then, of course, don't miss out on Robert Kiyosaki. He's the Rich Dad, Poor Dad author. And he's going to be both in Johannesburg and in Cape Town. Cape Town on the 18th of May, and in Johannesburg on the 25th and 26th of May. And to buy tickets, you can just click on the link there. You can meet him in person. Yes, he will be there live. And I mean, he's had a huge impact in people buying property, buying real estate, and really getting people to take action. And lastly, as we mentioned, if you the residential real estate and development, and to meet Marius and Maya, come and join us at the Reside Summit. We've also got the links there in the box. And gentlemen, thank you once again for your input. It's been fantastic. And thank you all for joining us. We wish you all the best on your path to success and wealth creation, successful investing. And from Maya, Marius, myself, until next week, it's Friday, the 19th of April at 2 o'clock for our next webinar. At 2 o'clock, this is Neil Peterson of Real Estate Investor signing out. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.